I was scrolling through my grandfather's estate documents when I found a lease agreement for a building I didn't even know I owned, dated 2019, with a 5-year term that had expired 3 months ago. The tenant listed was the Riverside Grove Homeowners Association, and the monthly rent was exactly $1. My name is Quinton, and until last Tuesday, I thought I had a pretty good handle on the assets my grandfather left me when he passed away 2 years ago. The lawyers had walked me through everything: the house in Portland, Oregon, some stocks, a small savings account, and what they'd described as miscellaneous real estate holdings that I'd assumed were just empty lots or something equally boring. Turns out, one of those miscellaneous holdings was a 2-story brick building on Maple Street in the Riverside Grove neighborhood, about 20 minutes from downtown. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the lease document with growing confusion. $1 per month? That was basically free. My grandfather had essentially donated the space to the HOA for their use. The building was described as approximately 3,200 square feet, with a main meeting hall, 2 smaller offices, a kitchenette, and bathrooms. According to the property tax records I pulled up online, the building was worth about $450,000, and I'd been paying the property taxes on it for 2 years without really paying attention to which properties the bills were for. The lease was clear, 5 years, ending March 31st, 2024. Today was June 18th, 2024. They were officially squatting in my building. I grabbed my phone and called my buddy Marcus, who worked in property management. Hey, weird question. If someone's lease expires and they just keep using the property, what happens? They become holdover tenants, Marcus said. Depends on the state, but generally, if the landlord accepts rent after the lease expires, it can create a month-to-month tenancy. If they don't pay or you don't accept payment, they're trespassing. Why? Just found out I own a building that an HOA has been using. Their lease expired in March. Marcus whistled. Have they paid rent since March? I checked my bank statements. They were paying $1 a month, but I don't see any deposits since February. Then they're trespassing. You need to send them a notice to vacate. Do you want to keep renting to them? I thought about it. The Riverside Grove HOA had a reputation, and not a good one. I'd heard stories from friends who lived in that neighborhood about aggressive fines, ridiculous rules, and a board president who treated the community like her personal fiefdom. I need to see the building first and figure out what I want to do with it. That afternoon, I drove over to Maple Street. The building sat on a corner lot, surrounded by well-maintained landscaping that I apparently also owned. It was a handsome structure, probably built in the 1960s, with good bones and plenty of parking. A sign near the door read Riverside Grove HOA Community Center members only. I tried my grandfather's old key ring, and sure enough, one of the keys fit the front door. I walked inside and was immediately struck by how nice it was. The main hall had hardwood floors, large windows, and a small stage at one end. Folding tables were stacked against one wall, and chairs were arranged in neat rows. One of the offices had filing cabinets and a desk with a computer. The other office was smaller, with a couch and more filing cabinets. Posted on a bulletin board in the hallway was a schedule of events. According to the calendar, the HOA held their monthly board meeting every third Thursday. I checked my phone. That was tomorrow. I spent an hour walking through the building, taking photos and making notes. The place was in decent shape, though it could use some updating. As I was leaving, I noticed a woman in her mid-50s walking up the path with a stack of papers. She had that particular haircut I'd come to recognize, shoulder-length, aggressively blonde with chunky highlights, and styled in a way that seemed to defy both gravity and common sense. "Excuse me, this is private property," she called out. "Are you a resident of Riverside Grove?" "Actually, I own this building," I said pleasantly. Quinton. My grandfather was Harold Quinton. Her face went through several interesting expressions. "Harold passed away years ago. The building belongs to the HOA now." "No, it doesn't. My grandfather leased it to the HOA for 5 years at $1 per month. That lease expired in March. I'm the property owner." She drew herself up to her full height, which was maybe 5'4". "I'm Patricia Donnelly, president of the Riverside Grove Homeowners Association. We've been using this building for 7 years. We have a lease." "Had a lease," I corrected. "It expired, and you haven't paid rent since February." Patricia's face flushed. "That's a clerical error. We've been sending checks to the address on file." "What address?" She seemed flustered. "I'd have to check with our treasurer." "Well, I haven't received any rent payments. According to Oregon law, that makes you holdover tenants. I'm going to need you to vacate the property." "Absolutely not." Patricia's voice rose sharply. "We have our monthly meeting tomorrow night. We have events scheduled. We have files and equipment stored here. You can't just kick us out." "I can, actually, but I'm willing to be reasonable. I'll let you use the building for your meeting tomorrow, and we can discuss terms for a new lease if you're interested. But the $1 per month deal is over. This building is worth real money, and if I'm going to lease it, I need to charge market rate." Patricia looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Your grandfather understood the value of community. He supported our mission to maintain property values and neighborhood standards. That's great, but I'm not my grandfather. I'll see you tomorrow at the meeting." "What time?" 7 p.m. "But it's a closed meeting for board members only." "It's my building. I'll be there." I walked past her to my car, feeling her glare burning into my back. That evening, I did some research on the Riverside Grove HOA. The neighborhood had about 200 homes, and the HOA was mandatory for all residents. The monthly dues were $150, which meant the HOA was collecting about $30,000 per month, or $360,000 per year. Their financial statements, which were required to be available to homeowners, showed that they spent money on landscaping for common areas, a neighborhood pool, and administrative costs. I dug deeper into the administrative costs. That category was eating up about $180,000 per year, which seemed excessive for an HOA that basically just maintained some common areas and held meetings. I made a note to ask about that. I also found complaints. Lots of complaints. Homeowners posting on neighborhood forums about ridiculous fines for trivial violations. One person got fined $500 for having their garbage can visible from the street for more than 12 hours. Another got hit with a $750 fine for painting their front door a color that was not on the approved list, even though the color was clearly within the approved palette. Patricia Donnelly's name appeared frequently, usually in the context of aggressive enforcement and dismissive responses to homeowner concerns. The next evening, I arrived at the building at 6:45 p.m. Several cars were already in the parking lot. I let myself in with my key and found Patricia in the main hall, setting up a table at the front of the room with 4 chairs behind it. She saw me and her expression hardened. "Mr. Quinton, I hoped you'd reconsider attending tonight. It's my building. I'm curious to see what you do here." 3 other people entered. A thin man in his 60s wearing a polo shirt and khakis, a woman in her 40s with nervous energy and a tablet, and another woman in her 50s wearing a blazer and carrying a leather folder. Patricia made introductions. "This is Gerald Foster, our vice president, Linda Chen, our secretary, and Diane Murphy, our treasurer. Everyone, this is Connor Quinton. He claims to own this building. I don't claim to own it. I do own it. I have the deed and property tax receipts." Gerald frowned. "Harold gave us this building. It was a gift to the community. He leased it to you for 5 years at a nominal rate. The lease expired. No one transferred ownership to the HOA. Diane, the treasurer, cleared her throat. "I'm sure we can work something out. What are you proposing?" "First, I want to understand your budget and what you'd be able to pay. Second, I want to know why no one noticed the lease was expiring." Patricia's jaw tightened. "We've been busy maintaining community standards. Minor administrative details occasionally slip through the cracks. A lease expiration isn't a minor detail." More people began arriving, regular homeowners coming in for what I now realized was an open session after the board meeting. About 30 residents filed in, taking seats in the rows of chairs. Several looked at me curiously, probably wondering who the stranger at the front of the room was. Patricia called the meeting to order at exactly 7 p.m. "Good evening, everyone. Before we begin regular business, we need to address an unexpected situation. This is Connor Quinton. His grandfather, Harold Quinton, previously leased this building to the HOA. That lease has apparently expired, and Mr. Quinton is asserting ownership of the property." A murmur ran through the crowd. One man raised his hand. "Does that mean we don't have a place to meet?" "We're working on it," Patricia said smoothly. "I'm sure Mr. Quinton will be reasonable once he understands how important this facility is to our community." "I'm completely reasonable," I said, standing up. "I'm happy to lease the building to the HOA at a fair market rate. But I need to understand what you can afford and what you're currently spending money on." Patricia shot me a look that could melt steel. "Our budget is HOA business, not public entertainment." Linda, the secretary, spoke up quietly. "Actually, Patricia, homeowners have a right to review the budget. It's in the bylaws. Then they can request it through proper channels." Patricia snapped. I decided to push. I pulled your financial statements from the county records. You're collecting about $360 per year in dues. You spend about $180,000 on landscaping and pool maintenance and another $180,000 on administrative costs. That seems high. What are the administrative costs? The room went very quiet. Diane, the treasurer, looked uncomfortable. That includes legal fees, insurance, management costs, and other expenses. What other expenses? Patricia stood up abruptly. This is not the time or place for an audit. We have regular HOA business to conduct, Mr. Quinton. If you wish to discuss a lease, you can contact me directly. Otherwise, please let us proceed with our meeting. I sat down but didn't leave. The meeting continued with typical HOA business. Patricia ran through a list of violations and fines being assessed against various homeowners. The amounts were staggering. Lot 45, house number 892 Riverside Drive. Grass height exceeded 4 inches. Fine, $200. Lot 73, house number 1034 Maple Street. Holiday decorations visible past January 5th, $150. Lot 102, house number 147 Oak Avenue. Non-approved mailbox. Fine, $300. One homeowner, a young woman with a baby on her hip, raised her hand. Patricia, I'm the one with the mailbox violation. I just moved in 2 months ago. The mailbox was already there. Can I get an extension to replace it? The rules are clear. All mailboxes must be from the approved vendor list. You have 30 days to comply or the fine increases to $500. But the approved vendors charge $400 for a mailbox. That's insane. Patricia's smile was cold. Then you should have researched our community standards before purchasing your home. Next item. I watched this performance with growing anger. This was exactly the kind of petty tyranny that gave HOAs a bad name. These people were collecting $360,000 per year and using it to terrorize their neighbors over mailboxes and grass height. After the meeting ended and the homeowners filed out, looking variously frustrated and defeated, I approached the board members as they packed up their materials. I need to see your complete financial records, I said. Bank statements, invoices, everything. I want to know where that $180,000 in administrative costs is going. You have no right to our financial records, Patricia said. You're not a homeowner in this community. No, but I'm your landlord. And if you want to keep meeting in this building, you're going to be transparent about whether you can actually afford to pay rent. Gerald stepped forward. Now look here, young man. We've been operating this HOA for 15 years. We don't need some outsider coming in and questioning our management. I'm not questioning your management. I'm questioning your budget. You're spending $180,000 per year on administrative costs for an HOA with 200 homes. That's $900 per home per year just on administration. What are you paying yourselves? Diane looked away. Linda suddenly became very interested in her tablet. Patricia's face turned red. Our compensation is appropriate and approved by the board, Patricia said. How much? That's confidential. No, it's not. HOA financial records are required to be available to homeowners. I may not be a homeowner, but I can certainly find one who'll request them. Or I can just evict you and rent the building to someone else. Patricia gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. Fine. Diane will provide you with our financial records, but I want it on record that this is harassment and overreach noted. I want everything by Friday. And Patricia, no more meetings in this building until we have a new lease signed. That includes your board meetings. I left before she could respond, but I heard her furious voice echoing behind me. Over the next 2 days, Diane Murphy emailed me PDF files of the HOA's financial records. What I found was stunning. Patricia Donnelly was paying herself $85,000 per year as HOA president. Gerald Foster received $40,000 as vice president. Diane got $30,000 as treasurer, and Linda received $25,000 as secretary. Together, the board members were taking $180,000 per year out of the HOA budget. I called Marcus again. Is it legal for HOA board members to pay themselves? Depends on the governing documents and state law. In Oregon, it's legal if the CC&Rs or bylaws specifically allow it and the compensation is reasonable, but they have to disclose it to the homeowners and get it approved. What are they paying themselves? I told him. Marcus whistled again. That's way excessive for a 200-home HOA. Most HOA boards are volunteer positions. Some pay a small stipend, maybe $5,000 or $10,000 per year for the president. But $85,000? That's almost certainly not going to meet the reasonable standard. What if the homeowners don't know about it? Then you've got potential fraud. The board has a fiduciary duty to the homeowners. If they're hiding their compensation or inflating it beyond reasonable levels, that's a serious breach. Homeowners could sue. I spent Friday putting together a detailed analysis of the HOA's finances. The more I looked, the worse it got. Patricia had been billing the HOA for consulting services through a separate LLC she owned. The HOA was paying for her car lease as a business expense. There were charges for meals, travel, and even a $5.00 leadership training conference in Hawaii. On Friday afternoon, I received an email from Patricia. Mr. Quinton, we are prepared to offer a new lease at $500 per month for the building. This is a generous offer given our long history with the property. Please confirm your acceptance by Monday so we can proceed with our regular meeting schedule. I wrote back, Patricia, the market rate for a commercial property of this size and quality in this location is approximately $3,500 to $4,000 per month. However, before I agree to lease to the HOA at any price, I need to understand if the HOA can afford it, given that the board is paying itself $180,000 per year. I'd like to meet with the full board and review the compensation structure. I'm also going to need proof that the homeowners know about and approve these payments. Her response came within 10 minutes. Our compensation is none of your business. We have a contract approved by the board. If you won't lease to us at a reasonable rate, we'll find another location, I replied. Good luck with that. Also, you have until Monday to remove all HOA property from the building. The lease is expired, and I'm not extending access without a new agreement. That weekend was quiet, but Monday morning brought fireworks. My phone rang at 8 a.m. It was a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Quinton, this is Jennifer Walsh. I live in Riverside Grove, and I heard you own the HOA building. That's right. A group of us homeowners are very interested in talking to you. We've been trying to get financial information from the board for months, and they keep stonewalling us. We heard you ask them about their budget. I did, and what I found was pretty disturbing. Can you meet with us? There are about 15 of us who've been talking about trying to recall the board. If you have financial information, it could help. We arranged to meet that evening at a coffee shop near Riverside Grove. I brought printed copies of all the financial records Diane had sent me. The group that showed up was diverse. Young couples, retirees, single homeowners, families with kids. Jennifer Walsh turned out to be a woman in her 30s, a lawyer who worked for a nonprofit. She took charge of the meeting immediately. Okay, everyone, this is Connor Quinton. Connor, thank you for meeting with us. Can you tell us what you found? I walked them through it, the compensation, the consulting fees, the expenses, the Hawaii trip. As I talked, I watched their faces cycle through shock, anger, and determination. A man named Robert, who looked to be in his 60s, shook his head. I've been living here for 10 years. We've never voted on board compensation. I didn't even know they were paying themselves. They're required to disclose it, Jennifer said. If they didn't, that's a violation of their fiduciary duty. We can use this. A younger woman named Sarah leaned forward. I got fined $500 last month because my kid left a bicycle on the front lawn overnight. Patricia said it was a persistent violation, even though it was the first time. Meanwhile, she's paying herself $85,000 per year. We need to recall the board, Jennifer said. Connor, can we get copies of these financial records? Absolutely. But you should also request them directly from the HOA. They're required to provide them to homeowners. We've tried. Patricia always has an excuse. The records are being audited, or they're with the accountant, or we need to put the request in writing with a specific purpose. That's illegal in Oregon. HOA financial records have to be available for inspection by any homeowner. If they're refusing, you can sue for access. Jennifer made notes. We need to move fast. The bylaws require a petition signed by 20% of homeowners to trigger a recall election. That's 40 signatures. I think we can get that by the end of the week. There's something else, I said. They need a place to meet. I'm not renewing their lease at the current terms, and I'm not sure I want to rent to them at all until there's a new board. But I'd be willing to let a properly functioning HOA use the space at a reasonable rate. What's reasonable? Robert asked. Market rate is about $3,500 to $4,000 per month. But if the HOA stops paying the board and uses that money productively, they could easily afford $2,500 or $3,000 per month and still have money left over to reduce dues or improve services. The group talked for another hour, strategizing and organizing. By the end of the meeting, they had a plan: collect signatures for a recall petition, formally request financial records from the HOA, and prepare for a legal fight if necessary. On Tuesday morning, I received a letter from a law firm representing the Riverside Grove HOA. It was a cease and desist, demanding that I stop interfering with HOA business and defaming board members. It threatened legal action if I didn't immediately offer a new lease at the previous terms. I called my own lawyer, a sharp woman named Kate Brennan, who'd helped me with my grandfather's estate. She read the letter and laughed. "This is nonsense. You own the building. You have every right to decline to lease it, and you haven't defamed anyone. You've just shared factual financial information. Write back declining their terms and reiterating your offer to negotiate a reasonable lease with a reformed board." I sent the letter Kate drafted. Patricia's response was immediate and furious. She called my cell phone at 2 in the afternoon, her voice shaking with rage. "You have no idea what you've done. We've been maintaining this community for years. We've kept property values high. We've enforced standards. And you're destroying it because you want to squeeze more money out of us. Patricia, you're paying yourself $85,000 per year plus expenses. That's not maintaining the community. That's enriching yourself at the homeowner's expense. I earn every penny. Do you know how much work it takes to run an HOA? The complaints, the violations, the vendors, the meetings? Most HOA board members do it as volunteers. If you want to be paid, that's between you and the homeowners. But they need to know about it and approve it. And it needs to be reasonable. They did approve it. The board voted. The board voting to pay itself isn't the same as the homeowners approving it. Know that." She hung up on me. That week moved fast. Jennifer's group collected 63 signatures on their recall petition, well over the required 40. They submitted it to the board on Thursday, along with a formal written request for complete financial records, including all bank statements, invoices, and compensation agreements for the past 3 years. Patricia scheduled an emergency board meeting for Saturday morning, calling it a special session to address false allegations and malicious interference. The meeting notice went out to all homeowners with a clear implication that I was the villain trying to destroy their community. I showed up anyway. So did about 80 homeowners, far more than the room could comfortably hold. People lined the walls and sat on the floor. The energy was tense. Patricia called the meeting to order, her voice tight. "We're here to address some serious concerns. There have been false rumors circulating about HOA finances and board compensation. I want to be clear. Everything this board has done is legal, proper, and in the best interest of the community." Jennifer stood up. "Then show us the records. We submitted a formal request on Thursday. Where are the financial documents?" "We're preparing them. They'll be available next week." "That's not good enough. State law requires you to make them available within 10 business days of a written request. We're also here to submit a recall petition." Jennifer walked to the front of the room and handed Patricia a thick stack of papers. 63 homeowners have signed this petition calling for the recall of the entire board. Under the bylaws, you're required to schedule a recall election within 30 days. Patricia's face went pale, then red. "This petition is invalid. Many of these signatures weren't properly witnessed. They don't need to be witnessed. The bylaws just require signatures from homeowners in good standing." Gerald stood up. "This is a coup. You're all being manipulated by an outsider who wants to profit from our community. Quinton is trying to force us to pay excessive rent so he can make money off us." I stood up. "I'm happy to address that. I offered to lease the building at $2,500 per month, which is below market rate. That's $30,000 per year. You're currently paying yourselves $180,000 per year. If you stopped doing that and paid rent instead, you'd save $150,000 annually. You could lower HOA dues, improve services, or actually build a reserve fund." "We have a reserve fund," Diane said defensively. "You have $12,000 in reserves. That's 3 weeks' worth of operating expenses. Industry standard is 6 months of expenses, which for you would be about $180,000. Where's the money going?" The room erupted. Homeowners started shouting questions at the board. "How much are you paying yourselves? Why didn't we know about this? What happened to our dues?" Patricia tried to regain control, banging a gavel on the table, but the meeting had devolved into chaos. Finally, Linda Chen stood up and raised her hands. "Stop, everyone. Please, stop." The room quieted. Linda took a deep breath. "I'm resigning from the board, effective immediately. I was asked to serve as secretary 2 years ago, and I agreed because I thought it would be good for the community. When Patricia proposed compensation, she said it was standard for HOAs our size and that we needed to approve it as a board formality. I didn't question it because I was new and I trusted her experience. But I've been uncomfortable with the amounts for a while, and after seeing how much anger this has caused, I can't continue. I'm sorry." She walked out of the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Deanne stood up next. "I'm also resigning." "Linda's right. This has gone too far." "Patricia, Gerald, you told us this was normal. You said all HOAs compensate their boards like this. I'm a CPA, and I should have done more research. I take responsibility for that. But I'm done." She left too. Now it was just Patricia and Gerald at the table, facing a room full of angry homeowners. Gerald cleared his throat. "Fine. If that's how you all feel, I resign too. You people have no idea how hard we've worked. You're going to regret this when the community falls apart." He stormed out. Patricia sat alone at the table, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. "This meeting is adjourned," she said quietly, then gathered her things and left without another word. The room buzzed with conversation. Jennifer called for everyone's attention. "Okay, we need to act fast. Under the bylaws, if the board vacates, the homeowners need to elect an interim board within 14 days. I propose we schedule an emergency election for next Saturday. In the meantime, we need someone to handle urgent HOA business. I'm willing to serve as interim administrator if people trust me to do it." The vote was unanimous. Jennifer became the temporary HOA administrator, with Robert and Sarah agreeing to assist her. Over the next week, Jennifer and her team worked fast. They got access to the HOA's bank accounts and discovered that Patricia had written herself a $15 check 3 days earlier, described as final compensation. The account balance was now dangerously low. Jennifer called me on Tuesday. "Connor, we have a problem. Patricia took $15,000 out of the account before she resigned. We need that money back, but I don't know if we can get it. And we have vendor payments due. The landscapers haven't been paid in 6 weeks. Did the board actually approve the $15,000 payment? There's no board meeting minutes showing approval. She just wrote the check. That's theft. You need to file a police report." Jennifer hesitated. "That's a huge step. She stole $15,000 from the HOA. "Yes, I'm sure, and check if she took anything else." Jennifer and Robert spent the next 2 days going through 3 years of financial records. What they found was worse than I'd imagined. Patricia had been systematically siphoning money from the HOA through fake invoices, inflated expenses, and unauthorized payments. The total came to over $200,000. On Thursday, Jennifer filed a police report with the Portland Police Bureau. On Friday, 2 detectives showed up at Patricia's house in Riverside Grove. On Saturday, the day of the emergency election, Patricia Donnelly was arrested for theft in the first degree and fraud. The story hit the local news that evening. HOA president arrested for allegedly stealing over $200,000 from Homeowners Association. The reporter interviewed several Riverside Grove residents who expressed shock and betrayal. Jennifer gave a brief statement saying the new interim board was cooperating with law enforcement and working to recover the stolen funds. The emergency election resulted in a new board. Jennifer Walsh as president, Robert Chen as vice president, Sarah Martinez as secretary, and a retired accountant named Paul Henderson as treasurer. Their first official act was to eliminate board compensation entirely. Their second was to negotiate with me about the building. We met at the coffee shop on Sunday afternoon. Jennifer came with Paul, and I brought Kate, my lawyer. "Connor, we want to be straight with you," Jennifer said. "We can't afford $25 a month right now." Patricia cleaned us out. "We have about $8, Nizu's own in the bank, and we owe vendors about $12,000. We're going to have to do a special assessment just to get current." "What can you afford?" Paul ran through the numbers. "If we eliminate all the excess spending and run a tight budget, we could do $500 per month. Maybe $1. $800 in 6 months once we rebuild reserves." I thought about it. These were good people trying to fix a bad situation. "Okay, here's my offer. What, $200 per month for the first year, then we renegotiate based on the HOA's financial health. I'll also defer the first 3 months of rent so you can get caught up with vendors. In exchange, I want the HOA to agree to some reforms. No board compensation beyond a small stipend, maybe $2,000 per year for the president. Full financial transparency with quarterly reports to all homeowners and annual elections for all board positions." Jennifer looked at Paul, who nodded. "That's more than fair. We accept." Kate drew up the lease agreement, and we signed it the following week. The Riverside Grove HOA had a home again, and I had tenants I actually respected. The legal process against Patricia took months. The Multnomah County District Attorney's Office charged her with aggravated theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Gerald Foster was also charged as an accomplice, though his role was smaller. Diane Murphy and Linda Chen were interviewed but not charged. Prosecutors determined they'd been manipulated by Patricia and hadn't knowingly participated in the fraud. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that the board compensation was legitimate and approved, but the evidence was overwhelming. There were no homeowner votes approving the compensation. The amounts were far beyond industry standards, and the fake invoices and inflated expenses couldn't be explained away. In November 2024, Patricia Donnelly pleaded guilty to theft in the first degree and was sentenced to 4 years in prison, with a requirement to pay full restitution to the HOA. Gerald Foster pleaded guilty to a lesser charge and received 2 years of probation plus partial restitution. The criminal restitution, combined with a civil lawsuit the HOA filed, eventually recovered about $180,000 of the stolen money. With the recovered funds and some careful budgeting, the new board was able to reduce monthly HOA dues from $150 to $100, build up a healthy reserve fund, and still maintain the common areas properly. They also revised the governing documents to eliminate most of the petty rules that had made life miserable for homeowners. The approved mailbox vendor list was scrapped. The grass height rule was changed to a more reasonable standard. Holiday decorations were allowed within sensible limits. The neighborhood changed. People started attending HOA meetings because they were actually productive instead of just being Patricia's personal power trip. Committees formed to organize community events. The pool area got upgraded with the money that used to go to board compensation. Property values did increase, but for the right reasons. People wanted to live in a community that functioned well, not one ruled by a petty tyrant. As for the building, it became something more than just a meeting space. Jennifer's board opened it up for community use. Residents could reserve it for birthday parties, baby showers, and family gatherings. Local nonprofit groups could use it for meetings at a reduced rate. It became a real community center instead of just Patricia's throne room. I stopped by one evening in March 2025, almost a year after I'd first discovered I owned the place. The HOA was having their annual meeting, and I wanted to see how things were going. The parking lot was packed, and the main hall was full of residents. The energy was completely different from that first angry meeting. People were chatting, laughing, and actually seemed happy to be there. Jennifer saw me and waved me over. "Connor, thanks for coming. We wanted to present you with something." She handed me a plaque. It read, "To Connor Quinton in appreciation for helping us take back our community. Riverside Grove HOA 2025. I felt embarrassed but pleased. "You all did the hard work. I just asked some questions. You asked the right questions at the right time. If you hadn't pushed back when you did, Patricia would still be stealing from us and making everyone miserable." After the meeting, I walked through the building one more time. In one of the offices, I found a framed photo hanging on the wall. It showed my grandfather at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the building, probably back in the 1970s. He was smiling, surrounded by neighbors and friends. There was a plaque underneath. Harold Quinton, who believed in the power of community. My grandfather had leased the building to the HOA for $1 a month because he believed in community. But somewhere along the way, Patricia and her cronies had twisted that into something ugly, using his generosity to enrich themselves while bullying the people they were supposed to serve. I'd accidentally stumbled into this situation by finding an old lease agreement in a dusty file box, but I'd stayed because it was the right thing to do. These people deserved better than Patricia Donnelly's petty tyranny. They deserved a real community, one built on transparency, fairness, and genuine care for neighbors. As I drove home that night, I thought about how strange the past year had been. I'd gone from being a guy who didn't even know he owned a building to being an accidental hero in an HOA war. I'd made enemies and friends, navigated legal battles, and helped put a criminal behind bars, all because my grandfather had believed in community and had left me a legacy I didn't fully understand until I'd almost lost it. The building on Maple Street continued to host meetings, events, and gatherings. The Riverside Grove HOA thrived under Jennifer's leadership and eventually under the leaders who came after her. The $1 lease was gone, replaced by a fair agreement that respected both the value of the property and the needs of the community. And Patricia Donnelly's reign of petty tyranny became a cautionary tale, a reminder that power without accountability always leads to corruption. I kept the plaque they gave me on my desk at home. Whenever I looked at it, I remembered that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply ask questions when something doesn't seem right. Patricia had counted on people being too intimidated or too busy to challenge her. She'd built her little empire on the assumption that no one would look too closely at the numbers or demand transparencies. She was wrong, and that made all the difference. The lease with the Riverside Grove HOA still sits in my files, now properly updated and renewed each year. Every month, like clockwork, a check arrives for $1,500, the rent having been increased after the first year as the HOA's finances stabilized. It's not a fortune, but it's fair. More importantly, it represents something good. A community that learned to stand up for itself, a system that was broken and then fixed, and a building that finally serves the purpose my grandfather intended. Sometimes I still get calls from people in other neighborhoods, asking for advice about their own HOA problems. Word spread about what happened in Riverside Grove, and apparently I've become something of an accidental expert on HOA corruption. I always tell them the same thing: demand transparency, know your rights, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Most HOAs are run by decent people trying their best, but the ones that aren't can only survive in the shadows. Shine a light on them and they crumble. The building on Maple Street still stands on its corner lot, brick and solid and dependable. The sign out front no longer says members only. Instead, it reads Riverside Grove Community Center, all welcome. That small change in wording represents everything that happened, everything that changed when people decided they'd had enough of being bullied and controlled. And it all started because I found a 5-year-old lease agreement in a box of my grandfather's papers, noticed it had expired, and decided to actually look into what was happening in a building I didn't even know I owned. Sometimes the smallest decisions lead to the biggest changes. Sometimes asking why is the most powerful thing you can do. And sometimes discovering that someone's lease just expired is exactly the beginning of the story everyone needed.